adaptive environment starts with you. When you first heard that you were coming to a training, what was the email that you received or the message that you received? What was it? Mandatory. What else did you see on there besides mandatory?
9 o'clock is full.
Sorry?
9 o'clock is full.
9 o'clock is full. Oh, you wanted to come to morning session. Okay, well, I'm glad we have 2 sessions. That's right. I heard that what you saw was mandatory. And whether you're being voluntold to be here or whether you're excited about what's going to happen throughout this next hour and 10 minutes or so, then I'm glad that you're here. Hopefully you can take something away with you today that you'll be able to share with others in your sphere of influence, or that you'll be able to share going down or going up within the organization. So before we get started, I want to share what we're going to do today, because that puts us out on an even playing field. So, oh, I have a clicker. So what are we doing? First, I'll tell you a little bit about me. Why am I here? Why am I in front of you today about this? My name is Yolanda Stephen, and I work for Troup County School System. What does that have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion? We'll talk about that. Why diversity, equity, and inclusion? We'll be talking about some stats. So I'll share some national stats with you. I also talk about a little bit about what's going on here in Troup County and how that pertains to us and what we do every day. Successes and failures. When you look at programs, and I know that you're not trying to create a program for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but when you look at personally in your team, what are some successes and failures that can take place in your own team as we learn more about emotional intelligence and about the generational differences that's taking place in the shift that's happening around us. And I think if nothing else, past these 18 months, we've seen a shift in employees, a shift in the way that we work, a shift in the way that we respond to different people in different situations, and we've all had to really boost our mindset for that. Lastly, we'll have some closing stuff, and that's just what I call it. We're doing some house cleaning. We'll have a breakout session that lasts for about 10 minutes, and you'll speak with each other and share successes and failures within your own teams. Because from what I understand, it's a flat organization, and you work across, and you could be that team that helps another team go to the next level. With that, about me. My name's Yolanda Stephen, again, and I work with Troup County School System. I'm the Director of Public Relations, but I'm also the Vice President of Diversity Engagement for the National School Public Relations Association. I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in a business standpoint, in a state standpoint, also in a national standpoint, and I've been doing this for about 6 years now. So this is not new. It's fun. It's interesting work. It forever changes. It's ever evolving, and that's something that I want you to keep in mind as we go forward. Now, because I'm a communicator by nature, I like to reach out to people, and I like them to reach out to me. So you see here my LinkedIn, my Twitter, I blog, talking about communications, talking about diversity, talking about inclusion, talking about education, whatever the subject and topic is, I try to tie it in so you can learn something. What else about me? So when I graduated from Georgia Southern University, and I spent all my mom's money for 4 years of college, my mom and dad's money, I decided I did not want to go into the field that I graduated in. So I decided to become a flight attendant until I figured it out. Some of you all may have teens like that that's coming up, or you may be that type of person yourself. So I decided to become a flight attendant, and then 9/11 happened. I was working for 3 years. 9/11 happened. I was going to get on a plane, and we were called and told, don't stay where you are, stay at the hotel. We were going to New York at the time. And at the time we had pagers. Anybody remember those? We didn't have cell phones. So they paged us and let us know, stay where you are. As we sat in the lobby looking at what was taking place around us and the shift that was taking place, we didn't realize how that was going to impact us later on in life. So a year passed, people still weren't flying. I ended up getting furloughed, so I moved from Baltimore back down to my home in Columbus, Georgia, and I was able to get a job with AFLAC. And I started working in communications, working with diversity, education, and the diversity team at AFLAC, and that's really what spurred the thought and the love for this type of work. So at AFLAC, I worked there for about 7 years, and then I decided to get married and have kids, and I needed a more stable hourly job because I would have to get up and go and move, and I needed something that was more pertaining to my kids' schedule. My husband passed, and that became even more evident. So I started working at Goodwill, and many of you may have heard of Goodwill. They're going to bring a great career center and a great donation center here in LaGrange that's being built right off of Commerce, but you may know them as donating your goods or sending your goods there. They also help provide training and education to the people in the community that they serve, which is going to be big here for us with our 70,000 residents and people who we know need more education and need a skill. And that may potentially come and work for you all. After that, Troup County School System fell in my lap. They said, we need somebody here to be a PR person. And I said, hey, that sounds great. So I've been here for 7 years. I moved to Troup County, and I learned about Troup County through word of mouth. Because Columbus, Muskogee County isn't far away, right? But what we had at the time, it wasn't as much burgeoning on the internet. It wasn't as much information. I couldn't sit in one place and find it out. I had to talk to people I knew and hope that someone knew about what LaGrange was about to make me want to move here. So that is my background. And again, I work with diversity engagement all the time. With that said, it's a little bit about me. One other thing that I like to share is that I still love to travel. And I can't go anywhere without talking about traveling because I'm a person who grew up in a home, in a lower income home with a mother. My father and mother were divorced, and I had 2 sisters in the home and 5 that were not in the home. So I'm the youngest of 5, 6, 7, and it was a great opportunity to grow up, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what I wasn't taught until I got out in the world a little bit more. So I still love to travel and eat food while I travel. So these are some of the things that I eat and I see as I go. That was in San Juan. And here I was in Morocco, and I had a great time. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know if I could stand close to the guard. I didn't know, but it was fun just trying to see and try. There was some great red snapper at the base of the Arenal volcano in Costa Rica. And that's where I was studying as well to get my accreditation in public relations. And that was on a trip to Italy that I took with 12, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. Can you imagine going anywhere outside of a school building with high school kids? We took them to Italy, and it was just amazing over that week and a half to see their eyes open, to see them asking questions, and to see their minds expanding. A picture is worth 1,000 words. One's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things. I have a question for you. What did you do before you came here? Before you came to this training, what were you doing? It's not a trick question, it's okay. Eating lunch? Working? Zooming? What are some things you're gonna have to do after this meeting?
Working.
Work? Some maybe didn't grab lunch. Later on this evening, some may have to cook. I'm going to ask just one thing of you. As you're sitting here and we're all working together and we're going on this journey together, I want you just to be open, expand your mind. Don't think about the phone call that you had to make before you got here. Don't think about the phone calls that you have to make after you leave here. Give me your space and give me your presence and give me your time. Because you're here in presence and in time, just give me just a little bit. And then I'll make sure to give it back to you because I want this to be the best 75 minutes of your day that you will go back and share with other people. And so as you open and expand your mind and give me that time, then we can be able to do that and I'll give you mine as well. Can we agree on that? Awesome. Let's set some more norms. So why are you here? I think we talked about this a little bit. What are you expecting to learn? I'm not sure if there was a description of what this training was about. It's not only about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we'll get into the terms and what those mean so we're all on the same page. It's also about you, emotional intelligence, some of the biases that we see, and some successes and failures that take place as we work in our norms. Because it's all known, no matter what you learn, if you don't keep on doing it over 21 days, you go back to the way that you were. So what are you expecting to learn? Are you sharing? When you leave out today, Will you share some of this information with those who you work with, those who are in your sphere of influence? Voluntold, I think we heard mandatory go around the room. We just love HR when they send a mandatory training. But let's hope today that you'll be able to learn a little bit more. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Laverna Myers. Diversity is being invited to the party. So you have someone new on the team, and you bring them on, and you find that, you know what, they are not really performing the way that I feel that they should perform. They're not a good fit. They're not here for the mission and values that we're here for. Do they feel included? Have you asked their opinion? Have you asked them, do they understand? Have you asked them, do they need more help in an area? Are you being a mentor as well as a supervisor or a manager? Sometimes it's okay to ask. They may not feel included, and they can tell you exactly what they need to feel included. When we go to talk about diversity a little bit, a lot of people think diversity is just about race. I want to dispel that myth, and if you leave with nothing else today, diversity is more than race. It's about sexual orientation, it's about religion, it's about ability, it's about more than race. It can be socioeconomic, it's a lot of different things. So when you think of diversity or you hear the word diversity, it's not a bad word. It's a word that we've just been using for a while, so it's like, oh, well, that's diversity. We need more diversity. You may hear, we need more diversity. 10 years ago, it was, we need more diversity. 8 years ago, we need more diversity and equity. 6 years ago, we need more diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now it's, we need more diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So it's a journey, it's ever expanding to reach out to more people because we have more people coming into the workforce. We have more people or different people than were here in LaGrange and Troup County 10 or 12 years ago. How do we deal with them when it comes to the services that we provide as Troup County? Inclusion, what is inclusion? Someone who feels a sense of belonging and value within an organization. Now, this goes to say, just because someone gives an idea, it doesn't mean you have to take the idea. It could be policies against something that they want to have happen, or there's a process for different things to happen. That's okay. Sometimes it's about education and educating the individuals on the parameters of what can and can't be done, especially when it comes to government. I work in education, so I completely understand that. And just like you all hear complaints and hear things from citizens, it comes back and it's like, well, what can we do? How can we have an open dialogue and discussion to see what can have happened? And that may be more education as opposed to let's change it. And that's okay. Equity. We said diversity, equity, the E, and inclusion. Here's an illustration, because some people say, well, what is equity? I don't understand. On the illustration above, you see that everyone can get an apple from the apple tree. They have an opportunity. But in equality, you see that it's maybe a little bit more different for somebody to get the apple off the apple tree because they're given the same box. Okay, here's an apple tree, here's a box, stamp on the box. But then you see with equity, where it's different size of the boxes, so you can have a better chance at reaching what you need. Think about when it comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When I think about this, I think about how now we have a lot of online, not just online learning, but we have people in our community. We have 80% of the people who have devices in their community. Some of them are their phone. Imagine trying to fill out a lot of information on the phone and you are ADA, but the website is not ADA compliant. You're asking someone, hey, you can get your tag online. Go online, you can fill out the information and get your tag, but that person may be 75 years old, wearing glasses, only has a phone, and doesn't have a hotspot at the house. So some of those things that we're offering that we can say, we're making it easier for you in a certain generation or at a certain time, it may not be easier for that other person. They can always come in, right? But what if they're in a low-income area and they can't make it? How do we offer the services and provide what they need so they get what they need and we get what we need? That's part of the equity of what you see here. So let's set some norms about some of the terms that we'll be using today, all right? And I need you guys, okay, or head nod. My dad's a preacher, and I say this all the time. My dad's a pastor. My sister's a preacher. My uncle's a preacher. I have a family full of preachers and pastors, all right? And if one thing I learned on Sunday morning is when you say amen, it helps the pastor along. It helps get you out a little bit faster. So if I hear a few amens after having lunch, we may go through this a bit more. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Native American, discrimination. And then there are some terms and definitions up under, and this is what I feel. So if there's something you see here, and I'm just gonna scroll, something you see here that you don't agree with, or that you're unsure of, let me know. Multiracial, person identifying as being from 2 or more races, not just black or white. 2 or more races, biracial. And that's going to be important when we start looking at some stats. Black, you know, some people say African American. I'm from a different generation. I'm fine with black. And sometimes if you ask, it's okay. Emotional attacks, on guard to protect against biases. Microaggression, we're going to talk about this a little bit. Behavior that communicates negative aggression to a group. It can be intentional or unintentional because we all grew up maybe differently, but what we learned is ingrained in us. Cognitive dissonance, a mental discomfort for something to go against what you believe. When you think about mask, it's a hot topic right now. Mask and mask mandate and standing 6 feet apart. We're from the South. I think, well, I don't know. Are we all from the South? We have anyone from the North? Anyone out West? Okay. When you first moved here from the South, from the North, what did you say about the culture here? Am I calling you out? I don't want to make a generalization.
No, and they talk funny.
They talk funny?
And I think one of my biggest, because I moved here from Chicago, I grew up, and everybody, the thing that threw me, it took me years, is do you want a Coke? Meant, do you want any soft drink? And I could not figure that out for years.
Yeah.
Also, mashing buttons. You mash potatoes, you don't mash buttons, so.
Yeah, we mash buttons and we
mash
find a
buttons
park.
down here,
We
yeah.
found a park, not a parking space. But I know what I hear from my friends up north and from my family who live up north, and when they come back down, they're like, oh, it's so touchy-feely, we hug, we shake hands, we're in close contact. That's been a little difficult for us to be distant. So when you think of cognitive dissonance, how we are used to, generalizing how we are used to being in close space and close quarters, because that's what we're taught, it's okay. We're taught that that's the proper thing to do. We do that with our friends, we do that with our family. Cognitive dissonance has made us mentally say, oh, okay, I need to stand back 6 feet, or, oh, okay, I need to change what I'm doing. That's just generally what cognitive dissonance is. When you think about how you have to change something that you're so used to doing. White. Emotional intelligence, the capacity to be aware of, control, and express emotions, handling interpersonal relationships. So these are some of the topics and terms that will be used throughout today. Is that okay? So we're going to move on from some of these terms. Now, if you are going to have a program in the future, one thing that you need to consider is setting norms. When we look at groups and work groups that work together, we have terminology in education, and I know in government, you also have a lot of acronyms. When you have new people come onto the team, make sure to take those acronyms and make it useful for the folks coming on so they can feel included. Why diversity, equity, and inclusion? Some stats out there say some, and we're gonna go through some. Why DEI? It can create ideas with different teams that brings a wider spectrum of ideas. When you think about your team now, think about the different ages, the different generations, the different races, abilities, background, socioeconomic, where they went to school, where they're from, how that perspective can help a team, and how you can use them in a positive, not use them, but how their abilities can be used in a positive manner to help the team or help what you're doing for the mission and goals, not only of your team, but of the organization as a whole, and ultimately Troup County. light bulb, greater creativity and innovation. I see this when it comes really generational. So you have greater creativity and innovation because after a while you get stuck in, we always do it this way, we've always done it this way. And when you hear that idea, sometimes stop to think about, do that cognitive dissonance, like, oh no, that's not gonna work, but you think, well, you know what, maybe we can pull some of that, but we're not ready for everything, but maybe we can pull a little bit. Connection to a wider range of consumers. I have parents and students, but think about citizens, think about employees. Connection to a wider range of consumers. Now, in education, we say we want parents and students to consume us. We want them to want to come. We want them to trust us. When you think about the work that you do, a lot of it may be in a different realm or aspect, right? But when you think about consuming, it's not only a one-way street. When you go to Home Depot, I went online to look for some mulch because I want some mulch for the front yard. And now I'm so used to going online and being able to order curbside, I couldn't order mulch curbside. And that bothered me. That was just at lunch. That bothered me because I'm that level of service. I'm used to consuming Home Depot, now curbside. I'm used to getting my taxes paid online. So how when it comes to connection, how is that helping when you have folks consume? It's not just a one-way street. It's not just you saying one thing and we're doing this. Now there are instances of that, right? Because we work in high-profile positions that we have to make quick decisions and we do it this way and this is what we've been trained, it's in us. And that's okay for those situations. I'm talking about when it's not those situations. Productivity. Some research shows as much as 35% more productivity on diverse teams. Let's go for a few more stats. 64%, according to a Porto Novelli survey, say that it is no longer acceptable for companies or governments to stay silent on social justice and diversity issues. What I say here is Troup County has some great leaders who are leading the way in what this looks like. Before I came here, didn't know anything really about LaGrange and Troup County. Well, when I got here, I saw that our chief of police, Chief Detmar, he was reaching out to police academy and citizen policing. He talked about that. And there was an opportunity for the city of LaGrange to apologize or atone for some things that had taken place in the communities around us that could really bring people together. They did that head on. And it was not only local news, it was national news. Because it's history here, and you have people that are moving in and see that and feel it, but when you call it out, you can move on from that and be a better place. And I actually saw that difference when I moved here. If you've been here all the time, it may have been the same, but moving here, I saw how that difference made. It wasn't acceptable. And some leaders at the top said, it's not acceptable. We're gonna say something, we're gonna do something, we're gonna make atonement, and we're gonna move forward as a community. When the killing of George Floyd happened, even though it wasn't here, we had our leaders on the front lines. They were, at the time it was Zoom meetings, and so the mayors were having Zoom meetings with the chief of police about what was taking place and how our community was making a difference. That's a big deal for people who are looking to come to an area where they feel included. How many of you all have tried to sell a home lately? Anybody? Anybody try to purchase a home lately? Has anyone heard what's going on in the housing market lately?
Yes.
Okay, what have you heard?
Seller's market
They said it's a seller's market, they sell fast.
and overpriced.
Overpriced. Do you know why that is? It's supply and demand. I'm sorry?
Low interest rates.
Low interest rates. So there are different things that's creating this churn. Well, you know what? It's happening here in LaGrange. Some people are getting much more for their homes than what they purchased them for. That's positive for us, but that means people are interested in what we have going on here. You all have a lot to do with that and what we have going on here. When I go on the website, on Troup County government website, there are so many things I see. Oh, we're about an hour from Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. I don't have to deal with traffic. We have 70,000 residents. Oh, I don't have to deal with traffic again. That's not a lot. That's good. I can retire here. You talk about the lake. You talk about the amenities that are offered. You talk about how you service where people can consume. That's a big deal. So you're doing something right, but I know that there's some areas of potential as well. Let's look at some more stats. 2025, workers from underrepresented groups will fill 30% of leadership positions by 2025. We're in 2021. We may be lagging a little bit behind, but what does that look like when you see the high performers that are working with you? Are you mentoring them? Are you helping them? No matter if it's just a day-to-day grind. 72% of baby boomers identify as white, yet for millennials account for more baby boomers in number, yet only 56% identify as white. When you look up the census for Troup County and Troup County government, it shows, yes, 70,000 residents, but it shows a little over 75% of white Americans here. And it shows a little bit, about 20% that are black. How does that look? When we look around the room, are we representative of what we see outside? When we go out to police, when we go out to put out fires, and we see that all the time. I heard about a crash this morning and some folks had to be airlifted. So when you look at that, how are you dealing with the families that are coming involved? 78% of people think that companies with a focus on DEI offer competitive advantage. Again, when you think about the homes and the home prices, if nobody was coming to live in LaGrange or want to move to LaGrange, the supply and demand wouldn't be there. But they find some type of competitive advantage that makes LaGrange and Troup County a better place to stay than where they are. A few more. 2025 millennials will account for 75% of the workforce. In the session this morning, I had someone talk about, well, you know, those millennials come in, they don't want to come to work. They want to call in. They want mental health days. And what is a mental health day? I grew up, you took an aspirin, and you brought your tail to work. You drank some hot tea, you brought your behind on in. That was the conversation this morning. But when it comes down to 75% will be in the workforce, how are we working with those individuals? Are we making sure that they know the mission and values? Are they being put on a professional development plan? How are you mentoring them and moving forward? 78% of employees said they work at orgs that lack diversity in leadership positions. 41% managers say they're too busy as to why they don't focus on equity and inclusion. This one was important to me because I not only saw this in business, but when I look at county government, CEOs are men. 95% CEOs are men.
White men.
That's where I was going. So when you look at those stats of by 2025, the millennials consider biracial. What does that look like that's coming in, and how are we going to work with individuals who are different than we are? And that's okay, because at some point we're the same at some point. So emotional intelligence, there are two main ones, and stop me if you have any questions. Emotional intelligence, there are two main ones. There are conscious bias and biases. Explicit is not limited to race and ethnicity. When we talk about go beyond race, age, gender, physical ability, sexual orientation. Unconscious bias is implicit. It develops at an early age. This is how I grew up. I grew up with my mom going to work and being to work late because she worked at a factory. She was the plant manager, so she had to work late. So I grew up with my sister cooking dinner. I never learned how to cook because it was my sister's responsibility to cook dinner. It was my responsibility to clean. So even now, my sister cooks dinner. Even Thanksgiving dinner, even Christmas dinner. I don't cook dinner, but I'll help clean up afterward. So when you look at those things that are ingrained, you have that, right? Develops at an early age. It's more prevalent. Social stereotypes about certain groups that individuals form through everyday life. I mentioned earlier about 9/11, and we know the background of the folks who took credit for that. And when you would see someone with the hijab on, and you're going through the streets, did you go on the other side of the road? You have to think about some of those things that were a little bit more ingrained. Now at this point, you have the stickers in front of you, and some of y'all will have to share, and that's okay. Sharing is fine. Sharing is caring. So when you talk about emotional intelligence and talk about biases, they say for every one bias that you have, you need to think of 2 positive things to kind of overcome that bias. To try to think of something that's different that will put that person outside of the box. So I have a few questions here for you. And if that question that I ask pertains to you personally, just take a sticker and put it on your chest. Wear it proud. All right, a series of questions is not very many. The first question, if you have stickers, pull them out. You're gonna have to share, it's okay. First question, I have been in my position for less than 3 years. I have been in my position for 3 years or less. Think about what bias that perceives. I don't see very many people putting on stickers, so what bias that you perceive for somebody who's been in the position for 3 years or less.
There's a lot that needs to be put in a sticker on. I'll say that.
Now, if you've been in your
Less than
position
3
for
years.
17 years or more, put a sticker on. 17 or more. If you've been in your position for 17 years or more, think about the history that you have that you can share with those who 3 years or less. Or think about what the 3 years or less can do to reverse mentor and help you expand. It goes both ways. People think that I speak Spanish, but I don't. They look at me and think that I speak Spanish. Or assume that I speak Spanish. Even when you go out, you may say, oh, they probably speak Spanish. Let me go ask them. I think that's true. I hear a couple laughs. I studied overseas, meaning outside of the U.S. I studied outside of the United States. Think about the different perspectives when it comes to bias and emotional intelligence and what you can bring to the table. I studied outside of the U.S. People have told me that I'm a good listener. Nobody's told anybody they're good listener. What are y'all doing? All of y'all talking? People have told me that I'm a good listener. And this may be important when we talk about expanding the workforce and bringing in a different group of workers and people who may be working for you right now. They like to be heard. That is one thing, they love to be heard. So if you are not that great of a listener and have to take that cognitive dissonance and say, okay, you got 3 minutes. I'm listening for 3 minutes. Whatever it is, and you listen for those 3 minutes, and afterwards you go back to doing what you're doing or help that person out. Being a good listener is important. People pronounce my name wrong at least once a week. Think about when you're going to make house calls and you see the name, you're like, ugh. But besides people pronounce my name wrong once a week. It's something about a name. People like to feel like upon meeting that you know who they are and you're making that connection that we talked about earlier. So if you pronounce someone's name wrong or you say, no man, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Just opening up that conversation. I never attended college. And for some sectors and for some of the work that you do and people who work with you, they don't have to attend college. They may want a skill or a trade, and that's okay. I can recognize my emotions as I experience them. And that is something that you're taught. I see a lot of fire department, I see a lot of police officers, a lot of public work. So do you recognize your emotions as you're going in? Things have to be fast, they have to shift. But how is that when you get home? You turn it off, turn it on, live by yourself, it's okay. Do you recognize your emotions as they're happening? I avoid conflict and negotiation. I avoid it like the plague. I don't like conflict, I don't like negotiation. I have an unrecognizable disability. I have an unrecognizable disability. I have blonde hair.
I'm starting to get it.
I didn't say gray, I said blonde.
That gray baby, that ain't blonde.
People of my race have always been able to vote. People of my race have always been able to vote. Think about that when you talk about voting and you hear a lot, oh, well, we didn't have a lot of voter turnout or this community. You can look in the sectors of the community where there was a high voter turnout or where there was low voter turnout. And it may be moments for education and how you can work to see if we can have more voter turnout over here and if people can exercise that right. I take care of my adult parents. I take care of my adult parents. I take care of my adult parents and my teenagers.
I'm gonna run out of place now.
When you think about that from a workforce perspective, and we're seeing if you've been to the Zaxby's line lately, or if you have an open position and it's hard to fill positions, people are looking for understanding when it comes to things like that. Okay, I have to take care of my parents, so I may have to go take mom to the doctor, or I have to take my daughter to the doctor. As long as they're doing the work that needs to be done, how is that gonna shift for you here? If the last 18 months haven't taught anything, I hope it's taught a little bit of shift. Now, I was speaking with Sherry earlier, and we were talking about emotional intelligence, and you said something that really stood out to me that I would like for you to share with the group.
I work with circles in Troup County, and we work with multi-economic groups, and one of the things we've discovered, and I discover constantly that I do, is that we assign intent to people's behavior or their words from my framework, not necessarily from their framework, and I'm very often wrong. And so learning to listen and learning to know other people allows you to understand perhaps why they do what they do or say what they say. And that's a huge leap forward in relationships.
And when we were talking about emotional intelligence, you were saying the listening and understanding from someone else's perspective, kind of putting yourself in their shoes. I know, and I can repeat this over and over again, I know that's not every day. I know you can't do that every single time you go into a situation that's high and intense. But when you come back from that, when you're working here locally, where you are, whether it's the Parks and Rec, whether it's right here in this building, whether it's next door, wherever your location is and how that team is working together, if you want to make that a better team, especially going forward in the future, you'll consider some of those things. A couple more biases. So we have affinity bias, gravitating to people who look like you. When that comes into play and in perspective, it may be an opportunity for you to hire somebody. You may be more open to what someone says if they look like you. You have the same background, you come from the same socioeconomic status, but you have another qualified candidate who may not have that same thing, but they're qualified as well. So what do you do to get past that affinity bias to see who would be the best for the team and not just best for me? Attribution bias is linked to performance bias. Women versus men, we automatically think men need to be the leaders. Men, the head of the household, they need to be the leaders. But what we're seeing now, in colleges, 50 years ago, more males were receiving degrees, 50 years ago. Today, 56% of females are being degreed. Today, 56% of females are being degreed. How is that going to shift the work that we do as we look at our employees who come in and who are women and who may be young women? They may get married, they may have kids. How is that work going to shift, and what are we going to do about that outside of FMLA? Performance bias, a tendency to underestimate a woman's performance. And I will go even further to say not just a woman's performance, but another person who is not from the majority or the dominant group's performance. So when you think about an individual who is a black male, his performance in the workforce. When you think about a Hispanic female, her performance in the workforce. When you think about an Asian American in a sector that you don't normally think about an Asian American, how is that performance bias attributed to what we do and the decisions that we make on a daily basis? Again, Troup County, we have white, we have black, we have Asian American, we have Hispanic. In the school system last year, we had over 30 students who registered at one school from Guatemala. We had no idea where this burgeoning community was taking place. We didn't know how to contact the parents. We didn't know how to speak to the parents because we couldn't contact. So we had to do some research and step outside of ourselves to make sure that they were included, that they had the services from a school system perspective, but then also services from a government perspective and what they needed. So working hand in hand. Likability bias, expectations, men are natural born leaders. We just talked about that. and maternal bias, women and career assumptions. What does they go to? If you have a team and you're putting a team together and someone comes and they say, I'd like to be the leader on this team, I'd like this opportunity, I really want to move up in the organization, what can I do? And the thought is, you know what, they may not because they come from this background, or they may not because they just had an 80, or. So getting past that thought and really into what Sherry was talking about when it comes to emotional intelligence, moving past that. And I may be speaking to the choir, but I don't know, because I've been doing this training for 6 years, so you just never know what's taking place within your organizations. I'm not there. All I'm saying is sometimes it's okay to think outside of the box and to have a listening and open ear in mind. Some successes and failures. I like to start with unsuccessful programs because I'm very positive and I like to end on a positive note. So some unsuccessful programs or teams, they resist change. We've always done it this way. 2 weeks ago, you had sexual harassment training, and you have that every year. I heard, oh, we have this every year, we have this every year. The information may change. I didn't hear anything about equity and inclusion or diversity training. Resist change. We've always done it this way, so let's keep on doing it this way. And I'm sure with some of the things that have taken place over the past 18 months, you can say, we're doing it differently now, and here's why. Inconsistent, reactive versus proactive. I haven't been asked here today because we had a George Floyd or Eric Gardner or Ahmaud Arbery, or at the salon we had Asian Americans who were gunned down. That's not why I'm here today. That's not my purpose here today. So when you think about reactive versus proactive, is that what's taking place? Unsuccessful programs are inconsistent and they're reactive. So Troup County government is doing something right by being proactive. Weak implementation, honey-do list. I'm just gonna check the box. I did it. Now moving on, going to watch sports. Buy-in. Whether you believe it or not, employees reflect the leadership values. Employees reflect what you mentor them. And sometimes you can mentor without even knowing that you're being a mentor. If they see, when I get in a leadership position, I don't want to do that. You're mentoring them. It's the opposite way, but you are mentoring them. Successful programs. Align practices with the mission and vision and goals of the organization. Y'all know the mission of what you're doing here every day? For instance, are you only going out to help one citizen, or are you helping Troup County as a whole? When we say, ask a 4th grade teacher, what are you doing with this student? If they say, oh, I'm teaching them 4th grade word. No, you're teaching them life skills, you're teaching them to graduate, to go beyond what's in the classroom. What's your mission? What's your goal? You have numbers sometimes that you have to meet. You have work orders, and the work orders keep pouring in. How do you go about that consistency and making sure that they're done in an appropriate way and still keeping things together as a team, even when somebody falls out for a mental health day? Make sure they're aligned, the practices are aligned. Identify what you're trying to achieve. Yes, you may have numbers every day. You achieve them, how? That's up to the processes of the team. But you make sure that you identify what those are so you can be successful, not only with your team, but then externally when people come down the street and they see, oh wow, they cleaned this week. I love it. My trash has been picked up and there's no trash left on the street. That can bring a sense of, this is great, that's less that I have to do. But if you come sometime and the trash hasn't been picked up, think about that level of service. Identify what you're trying to do and do it. Implement it. Whatever you are implementing, if it's something new. I noticed with recycling, it was something new. Then we had to scale back with COVID-19. We didn't have that opportunity to have recycling again. How you implemented that and made sure that our citizens understood and knew about recycling was going to stop and where you could take your recyclables. You're very intentional about that implementation. And that goes a long way. People talk about that kind of stuff, and it's very little. People talk about that kind of stuff. Unique. Identify unique challenges. What's unique? And I'll say not only challenges, but identify unique successes. I just saw a video, and there's a series of videos that Troup County is working on, and I've forgotten the name of it. We are here, or I can't remember the name of it. But they're about a series of 4 or 5 videos that talk about the unique identifications of Troup County. It includes talking about circles. It includes talking about the lake at West Point. It includes talking about the burgeoning arts in Hogansville. It includes the Chattahoochee River Keepers. It's what's unique about who we are. And you all have helped to make that happen. So that's part of the successful program. Who's doing it right? Washington State. These are some of the things that they have, and I want you to think outside. Do we have this here internally? They have an overview of equity and inclusion, what they're doing. It's on their website. They have folks talk about it. They have a diversity, equity, and inclusion position. They have training. You're participating in training right now. They have public engagement initiatives. What are some of those that you have? Community health, maybe? Strategic plans. Does your organization have a strategic plan? If not, I hope you get one soon, because that goes into everybody's going in the same line. Community policing. DeKalb County, they're close to us, so I wanted to pull them. Community health events that are taking place. When you think about community health events right now, and how, it's a personal choice, but how some people are vaccinated and some are not, it's a personal choice. But educating our community on what is taking place, where it's taking place, kind of like you did with the recyclables, we've seen that happen. The county landscape. When you look at the census, you can pull it up on your phone right now and type in Troup County, Georgia census. And I can bet you people who are looking to move here do that same thing. Mental health, racial trauma. I'm sure you deal with this when you go out to do the work and answer some of those calls. How does that impact you, even though you didn't live in the mental trauma, even though you didn't live in the racial trauma? How does that impact you and the way that you work with the citizens around? Omaha Public Schools, I always have to put a school in there. I always pick on them. They're great. Their branding is great. They have hard conversation resources, not only critical conversations, but hard conversations. Strategic framework. They talk about how you can make a strategic plan so everybody's on the same page. Equity norms. We talked about setting norms earlier. They have those norms with definitions, so no one gets confused. Collaborative and affinity groups. I don't see that as much here, having affinity groups, but I do see where we're moving in that direction. And again, it's always room for improvement. Now with this, when I share with schools, I believe it's important to step outside of who you are as far as an organization, because other organizations are doing it right as well, not just other governments, and that's why I added Omaha Public Schools. And sometime I'll add Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's, when a person retires, they they name an ice cream after that person who's retired if they've been there for so many years, 40 or more years. They name an ice cream after that person, ice cream flavor, and they sell it in the stores for about a month or so. How would you like to have an ice cream flavor named after you? I don't know, I would. After so many years of service, it's so little. And they're already making ice cream. And they just put the person's name on it, say the number of years, say where they worked, and thank them for their service. How are we doing that as far as recognitions? I know there's a new recognition program here. So Mr. Mosley told me about it. So you guys are moving in a direction.